We're here to make sure that the American people have an option. And the option is, can you move the political parties off their respective sides? They've gone too far right and too far left. If that movement can move, but they can't be done, that can't be done unless they're threatened. I've never been in any race I've ever spoiled. I've been in races to win. And if I get in a race, I'm going to win.
All right, how many potential third-party candidates have said that over the past? Some very successfully getting double digits. Of course, we can remember back with Ross Perot getting 19% in 1992, yet not a single electoral vote. We can also remember, what was going on in countless elections in between and after, where at least the third-party candidate was influencing votes in key states. For example, Ralph Nader in Florida tilting a race that many argue Al Gore would have won had he not been siphoning votes away. So we could go on and on about this, but let's go to Senator Joseph Lieberman, the former presidential, vice presidential candidate, what he makes of this. Very involved in the No Labels movement, the co-chair. You know, Senator, once again, people are looking, could it happen? And many say, yeah, I'm open to it, but I think it's a wasted vote. What do you tell them?
I tell them that if they're as dissatisfied with the two major parties today and as angry with the two major parties as they are, maybe the best way to change that and try to get those parties to come back from the left and right toward the center and common ground and try to solve our problems is to support, one, the policy agenda we put out yesterday, which is bipartisan. It's not about us and them, it's about we the people. And the second is, if we decide to run a third ticket, a bipartisan unity ticket, to support that ticket. Because other than that, the two major parties seem to have been working hard at shutting out the majority of people who are not to the left and the right, but really in that broad middle ground where they just want the country to do better than it's doing now.
You know, Senator, one of the things I've heard is that the germ for all of this, the catalyst for this, was if we have the same race we had 4 years ago. In other words, if it were Donald Trump and Joe Biden going at each other, then No Labels would submit a candidate. The name that most often comes up is the West Virginia senator. But what if it's not that? What if it's a different race? Would No Labels stand down or what?
It depends. And incidentally, that's why we say that the effort we're making now to get on the ballot of all 50 states with a third line is an insurance policy, like any insurance policy. In many ways, you hope you don't have to use it, but it's there if you do. And we know that we're probably not going to be able to make a sensible decision about this until next year, certainly after the Super Tuesday primaries in March, in which case we would make the decision after that. May be that one or both of the candidates who are now leading, President Trump, Biden, will dominate the nominating process and decide earlier. But when the field becomes clear, then we'll decide whether we have a constructive role to play by running a bipartisan unity ticket. We'll do it if we think we actually have a chance to win, which I think we might, because the public distaste for the two parties and frankly for these two candidates is so great.
We're talking about John Hudson as well. I'm the former Utah Republican candidate for president as well. While I have you, Senator, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this controversial remark out of Pramila Jayapal. She's since dialed it back and about attacking Israel, but I want you to react to this in case some folks at home have not heard it. Take a look.
We have been fighting to make it clear that Israel is a racist state, that the Palestinian people deserve self-determination and autonomy.
A racist state, that's what Israel is. She's dialed that back somewhat. A lot of Democrats, a lot of Republicans are furious. What about you?
Well, I thought the statement was offensive, and offensive to everybody. It's just not the American way. And of course, it's not based on the fact about life in Israel. Israel is a great democracy, a rule of law country. The Israeli Arabs have tremendous rights, equal rights in Israel. Christians have more rights in Israel than in any other country in the Middle East. So this is part of too much undisciplined talk, which takes our country down, and it really hurts us. And I'm grateful that the Democratic leadership of the House immediately rejected this, but it was said in a way that makes you worry. And I think everybody's got to think a little bit about it. It was divisive, and I hope we don't hear anything like it again about Israel or any other people or any other allied country that really is a democracy and full of equal opportunity and equal rights under the law.
Joe Lieberman, thank you very much. I always enjoy our chats.
Thanks, Neil. I do too. Have a good day.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Kilmeade. I want you to do me a favor. I want you to click to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page. This is the only way that I know for sure that you're not going to miss any great commentary, any great news bites, any great interviews coming your way on Fox. You can get it all here on YouTube. So subscribe right now.